One dish on this list has been eaten more than 50 billion times. Another started a war between two American cities that's still raging today. And one, most people don't even realize, was never actually invented in America at all. These are the most iconic dishes ever created on American soil. And by the end of this video, you'll never look at your plate the same way again. We're not just ranking food today, we're ranking history, identity, and the moments that shaped a country's culture one bite at a time. From the streets of Philadelphia to the smokehouses of Texas, from church potlucks in the South to beachside stands in New England, every dish on this list tells a story that goes far deeper than flavor. Stay with me through the full ranking because the number one spot might genuinely surprise you. Number 10, New England Clam Chowder. Let's start somewhere most people wouldn't expect a food ranking to begin, with a bowl of soup. Not just any soup. New England clam chowder is arguably the oldest dish still widely eaten in America today. The earliest recorded recipes date back to the 1700s, when New England fishermen would make communal stews from their daily catch, tossing clams, salt pork, and hardtack biscuits into iron pots over open fires. This was survival food, peasant food even, and it transformed into something remarkable. By the 1800s, Boston restaurants were serving refined versions with cream and potatoes, and the dish became so tied to regional identity that in 2020, a bill was actually introduced, seriously, in the Maine state legislature to make it illegal to add tomatoes to New England clam chowder. That's how seriously people take this. But here's the part nobody talks about. The reason chowder lands on this list isn't because of taste alone. It's because it was one of the very first American dishes to develop regional pride and fierce, deeply personal loyalty around it. That instinct, that sense of, this is ours, don't touch it, would go on to define American food culture for the next 3 centuries. Iconic for what it started, not just what it tastes like. Number 9, the Philly cheesesteak. Now we move from the oldest to one of the most fiercely defended. The Philly cheesesteak was born in 1930, and even that origin has people fighting. The credit typically goes to Pat Olivieri, a hot dog vendor in South Philadelphia who supposedly tossed some beef scraps on his grill, added onions, and slapped it on an Italian roll. A cab driver smelled it, bought one, and word spread fast. Within years, it was a city institution. But here's what makes the cheesesteak genuinely iconic and not just locally beloved. It spawned one of the most intense food wars in American history. Whiz or Provolone, Pat's or Geno's? Those two cheesesteak shops, which sit directly across from each other at the corner of Ninth and Passyunk, have been feuding for decades. Tourists fly into Philadelphia specifically to choose a side. The cheesesteak also represents something important in American food history, the rise of immigrant neighborhood cuisine. The Italian-American community of South Philly created something that became a symbol of the entire city. That's not a small thing. That's culture being made in real time with a griddle and a hoagie roll. Number 8, apple pie. As American as apple pie. You've heard it 100 times. But what if that phrase is based on a complete myth? Here's the truth. Apple pie is not American in origin, not even close. Pie recipes with apples trace back to 14th century England. The apples themselves were brought to North America by European colonists. Indigenous Americans had never seen an apple before Europeans arrived, and yet, somehow, apple pie became the defining symbol of American identity. How does that happen? It happened through time, repetition, and cultural adoption. By the 18th century, apple orchards were everywhere in the American colonies, and pie was the most practical food you could make. Dense, calorie-rich, preservable, portable. Farm workers ate apple pie for breakfast. Soldiers carried it. Settlers brought the recipe westward. By World War II, when American GIs were asked why they were fighting, the most common answer wasn't democracy or freedom. It was for mom and apple pie. That's not a coincidence, and that's a century of cultural embedding at work. The dish didn't originate here, but it became America. And that, ironically, might be the most American thing about it. Number 7, barbecue ribs. We'll get to the biggest and most contested entry on this list in a moment. But first, we need to talk about barbecue. And when we say barbecue, we don't mean grilling. Real American barbecue is a slow, low-heat, smoke-driven cooking method that takes anywhere from 6 to 16 hours. It is labor. It is patience. It is ritual. The roots of American barbecue go deep and they go complicated. The technique traces back to indigenous cooking methods, specifically the use of indirect heat and smoke to cook large cuts of meat. When enslaved Africans were forced into the labor of cooking for southern plantations, they refined and elevated those techniques into something extraordinary. The flavor profiles, the spice rubs, the sauce traditions, that heritage is inseparable from American barbecue history. After the Civil War, barbecue pits became community gathering places, especially in the South. Churches, Juneteenth celebrations, political rallies. If you wanted a crowd, you fired up the pit. Today, 4 distinct regional barbecue styles compete for supremacy. Texas brisket, Kansas City ribs slathered in sweet tomato sauce, the vinegary pulled pork of the Carolinas, and the dry rubbed Memphis rib. Each region will tell you with absolute conviction that their style is the only real barbecue. They're all right, and they're all wrong. Barbecue is the dish that most honestly reflects who built this country and how. That's why it belongs on this list. Number 6, mac and cheese. Wait, and before we go further, you need to know this. Mac and cheese, the most beloved comfort food in America, became a national obsession largely because of one man who never actually invented it. Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson encountered macaroni and cheese in Paris and was so captivated that he allegedly sketched a pasta machine design and served the dish at a White House dinner in 1802. He didn't invent it. Pasta and cheese dishes existed in Italian and French cuisine for centuries, but Jefferson put it in front of the American establishment, and that mattered. The real transformation came much later. In 1937, Kraft introduced boxed mac and cheese at 19 cents a box. It was the height of the Depression. 19 cents fed a family of 4. In the first year, 9 million boxes sold. 9 million. Mac and cheese went from a genteel dish served at presidential dinners to the food that kept American families fed during one of the darkest economic periods in the country's history. That pivot, from luxury to lifeline, cemented its emotional place in the American psyche in a way no marketing campaign ever could have manufactured. Today, it's served at Michelin-starred restaurants with truffle and lobster, and it's also in every college dorm room in the country. That range, that democratizing span, is uniquely American. We're halfway through the list and we haven't touched the dish that literally changed American nightlife, the one that defined an entire city's identity, or the one that outsells everything else on this list by a margin that's almost impossible to comprehend. Keep watching. The top 5 is where things get genuinely interesting. Number 5. The hot dog. Here's something that will mess with your head. Hot dogs outsell hamburgers in the United States. Not close. Americans consume an estimated 20 billion hot dogs per year. That's roughly 60 per person. The hot dog is often dismissed as lowbrow, cheap, simple, and that dismissal is completely wrong. The hot dog is a German immigrant story. Frankfurt, Germany, and Vienna, Austria both claim to have invented the sausage that became the modern hot dog, which is why in America you'll find it called both a Frankfurter and a Vienna. German immigrants brought those sausages to the United States in the mid-1800s and began selling them from carts in New York City and Chicago. The iconic moment came at the 1904 World's Fair in St. Louis. Vendors were selling the sausages, and the story goes that a bread roll was introduced to hold them, making them portable handheld street food. Whether that exact origin story is fully accurate or somewhat mythologized, one thing is certain. The hot dog became inseparable from American public life. Baseball games, 4th of July, backyard cookouts, street corners in New York City at 2 in the morning. The hot dog is not high cuisine, but it is everywhere, always, and it has been for over 100 years. That kind of omnipresence earns its place on this list without apology. Number 4. Buffalo wings. This is the most precisely documented origin story on this entire list. And it happened by accident. The date, March 4th, 1964. The place, the Anchor Bar in Buffalo, New York. The woman, Teresa Bellissimo. The story, as the Bellissimo family tells it, is that a large shipment of chicken wings arrived at the bar by mistake. Wings were considered almost worthless at the time. Butchers gave them away or used them for stock. Teresa deep-fried them, tossed them in a butter and hot sauce mixture she improvised on the spot, and served them with blue cheese and celery. The bar patrons loved them. Now here's the part nobody talks about. In 1964, nobody was eating chicken wings as a food. They were practically refuse. What Teresa Bellissimo did, whether intentionally or not, was transform a discard into one of the most consumed dishes in American history. Today, Americans eat approximately 1.3 billion chicken wings on Super Bowl Sunday alone. One day, 1.3 billion wings. The National Chicken Council tracks this figure annually. It has gone up almost every year for 30 years. Buffalo wings also created an entire category of American dining: the sports bar, the bar food menu, the casual wings night out. The cultural ecosystem built around this dish is enormous, and it traces directly back to one woman in upstate New York who had too many chicken wings and no plan for what to do with them. That story is so American it almost feels invented. But it's not. Number 3, Chicago deep dish pizza. And this is where most people make the biggest mistake when ranking American food. They underestimate Chicago. New York will tell you that real pizza is thin, foldable, and best eaten walking down a sidewalk at midnight. Chicago will tell you that pizza should require a knife and fork, fill you up for an entire day, and take 45 minutes to bake. They are not talking about the same food. And that's exactly the point. Chicago deep dish was created in 1943 at Pizzeria Uno, founded by Ike Sewell and Rick Ricardo. The innovation was structural. Instead of treating the crust as a base, Sewell used it as a vessel. High-sided, buttery, almost like a savory pastry shell. Layers of cheese went in first, then toppings, then a thick layer of chunky tomato sauce on top to prevent burning during the long bake. The result was something that had never existed before. It was completely unlike Neapolitan pizza. It wasn't trying to be. It was its own thing. Built by and for Chicago. The New York versus Chicago pizza debate has been raging for 8 decades and shows zero signs of resolution. Food critics, celebrity chefs, and sitting U.S. presidents have all been forced to take a side. Barack Obama, a Chicago native, famously defended deep dish in the face of New York outrage on multiple occasions. That's the power of this dish. It doesn't just feed people, it makes them declare allegiances. Number 2, fried chicken. What happened next? The rise of fried chicken from a regional southern staple to one of the most consumed foods on Earth is a story that most people have completely backwards. Fried chicken is often attributed to Southern American cuisine in a general, casual way, but that framing strips out the essential history. The specific technique, seasoning heavily, coating in flour, and frying in fat, was perfected and systematized primarily by enslaved black women in the American South. Historians of food and culture have documented this extensively. The dish's flavor profile, its spice traditions, its cultural role in the South's food economy, that is an African-American culinary heritage. After emancipation, black women selling fried chicken at train stations became a significant economic force in the post-Civil War South. So much so that railroad companies tried to suppress it because the women were out-competing the dining cars. The dish then traveled. The Great Migration carried it north. It became a fixture of black-owned restaurants in Chicago, Harlem, Detroit, and LA. It crossed into the mainstream, and in 1952, Harlan Sanders began franchising what would become Kentucky Fried Chicken, bringing a version of the dish to every corner of the country, and eventually the world. Today, KFC alone has over 27,000 locations in more than 145 countries. Fried chicken is one of the most globally replicated American exports in culinary history, and its origin story deserves to be told fully, not just the franchise chapter. Number 1, the hamburger. More than 50 billion served. That's not a figure from the last decade. That's an estimate from McDonald's alone. And that slogan first appeared in the 1960s. The hamburger is not just an American dish. It is the most successful food export in human history. Its origins are, like most great American stories, complicated. The Hamburg steak, minced beef patties, was a German immigrant food popular in New York and Chicago by the mid-1800s. Several people and places claim to have put it on a bun first. The Charlie Nagreen story from Wisconsin in 1885, the Menches brothers at the same New York State Fair, and the Fletcher Davis claim from Athens, Texas around the same period. Nobody agrees. And in a way, that's perfect. Because America itself was built by competing stories about who got there first. What we know is this: the hamburger arrived on the world stage at the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair, exploded in popularity through the early 20th century diners and roadside stands, and became the anchor product for the fast food industry that McDonald's, Burger King, and Wendy's would build into a $250 billion global empire. But the hamburger's significance goes beyond commerce. It became a diplomatic symbol. Leaders of major nations have been photographed eating hamburgers as gestures of cultural goodwill. It became a benchmark for economic health. The Economist literally created the Big Mac Index as a measure of purchasing power parity between currencies. It became counterculture: gourmet burger movements, smash burger trends, black-owned burger concepts, and regional craft interpretations that reclaim the dish from corporate monoculture. The hamburger is everywhere. It absorbs everything. Every culture that encounters it makes it its own. Japan has teriyaki burgers. India has aloo tikki burgers. Korea has kimchi burgers. And yet it remains distinctly and recognizably American at its core. No other dish on this list can claim that kind of global reach, cultural flexibility, and sustained dominance. That's why the hamburger sits at number one. Not because it's the most delicious, not because it has the most interesting origin story, though it's a good one, but because no single food has done more to define what America exports to the world than this. So there it is. 10 dishes that didn't just feed Americans, they made Americans. From the chowder pots of colonial New England to the 50 billion burgers served around the world, every single one of these foods carries something bigger than a recipe. They carry migration, labor, invention, conflict, and pride. The most important thing this list reveals isn't which dish is most delicious. It's how much of American culture was built by people who were often not given credit for what they created. The enslaved cooks who defined Southern cuisine. The immigrant vendors who transformed scraps into institutions. The forgotten women like Teresa Bellissimo who accidentally changed what America eats on its biggest Sunday. Food is never just food. It's always a story about who we are and how we got here. If this gave you a new way of thinking about something you've eaten your whole life, hit the like button. It genuinely helps this channel keep making content worth watching. And drop a comment below. Which dish on this list do you think deserved a higher rank? I want to know what you'd put at number one. This is Good to Grub, where every dish has a story worth knowing.